2024 was the costliest year ever for natural disasters in Canada, with insured losses topping $8 billion for the first time. With natural disasters increasing in frequency and severity, the industry is warning that more parts of Canada are vulnerable to the types of wildfires currently devastating Los Angeles. We just saw some pictures of that there. For more, we're joined by Craig Stewart, Vice President of Climate Change and Federal Issues Insurance Bureau of Canada. Hi, Craig. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Good to be here. Good morning, Mark.
Now, we know that the summer of 24 in Canada was really terrible for disasters and insured claims. What really stood out about the events of last summer?
Well, it was the cluster of events, within a 2-month period, $7 billion in insured losses, which is just absolutely unprecedented. I mean, we broke any annual record for any preceding year within that 2 months. And really it was, many parts of the country that were affected, from those Jasper wildfires to flooding across Quebec and Ontario to just a terrible hailstorm in Calgary.
Speaking of unprecedented, we've seen these huge wildfires and losses of almost entire neighborhoods in Los Angeles. Could you tell us about the exposure or the potential for such an event in Canada? Are Canadians covered for this type of event?
So Canadians are definitely covered. Fire insurance is at the core of every home insurance policy across the country. Wildfire insurance is widely available. Most Canadians have it. But as far as exposure, yes, we're exposed. We've been seeing wildfires, on an annual basis in Northern Ontario, across BC and Alberta. We had a real scare on the outskirts of Halifax just a couple of years ago. Yes, there's a question of whether an event such as we're seeing in Los Angeles could occur. We have lots of cities that border on forested areas in this country.
Craig, the numbers since 2019 in terms of insurance claims related to disasters are quite staggering in terms of property damage and replacing personal property. Can you run through some of those numbers?
Sure. And to give you an idea of context, so the industry paid out about, $600 to $700 million on an average basis, 2023 dollars, from 2001 to 2010. So that's sort of our baseline. We had a big event, Fort McMurray wildfire in 2016 that came in at about $5.9 billion. But in recent years, we've just seen a slow tick up. So we paid out $1 billion in 2019 and 2020. Over $2 billion, 2021, over $3 billion, 2022 and 2023. And now suddenly this huge jump up to $8.5 billion in 2024. And that $8.5 billion was made up really of 4 events. Jasper wildfire that came in close to $1 billion, widespread Quebec floods that came in at around $2 billion. In Ontario, people in Toronto will remember the floods of last summer in July that came in also, roughly around 2, and then just an incredible hailstorm that made up much of the remainder in Calgary, which was a 20-minute event and resulted in, I think, 70,000 claims. And was just, that was the biggest single event, ironically, the one that probably got the least media coverage.
Craig, the Insurance Bureau of Canada believes that it's time for, I'm paraphrasing here, but governments to step up and take decisive action to manage and mitigate risk. What are some of the things that they could do and should do?
So, insurers have a lot of tools at their disposal to manage the risk. There's a lot that they can do with product coverage, et cetera, determining whether they want to be exposed to a particular region in the country at all. But at the end of the day, they're going to price for risk, and pricing is going up. Premiums are more costly. And if we want insurance to remain affordable and available in this country, governments who have been ragging the puck on this issue for much of the last decade, governments are going to have to step up. Both provincial and federal governments are going to have to step up, invest more in adaptation, make hard decisions about keeping people out of harm's way. If we're building, another 1 million homes in this country, let's make sure we're not putting them in floodplains. We need to accelerate work on building codes. And we need to take a look at some sort of insurance partnership, which almost every other G7 country has, between the public sector and the private sector, to make sure that we can continue to offer affordable insurance in high-risk areas across the country. Those are key things that we've had on the table for years now. Unfortunately, the federal government in particular has been very slow to act, and we need to now, I mean, unfortunately, the Los Angeles wildfires are bringing a lot of attention to this issue, but that has to, there needs to be decisive action by governments across the country at this time.
Craig, I'm just wondering on the flip side of the coin in terms of regions in Canada, where are the regions where they're just relatively unscathed for whatever reason? They don't seem to have a lot of these kinds of climate issues.
So Toronto, aside from the flooding, Toronto is a relatively safe place to be. I mean, we do have flood risk, but it hasn't been life-threatening flood risk. Very low earthquake risk in Toronto. Obviously, not a lot of wildfire. Don't see hail, destructive hail. So Toronto's a relatively safe place to be. Other parts of the country that are more at risk, BC, Alberta, are places that are at very high risk. And Quebec, unfortunately, from a flooding perspective, seems to be at very high risk. But yeah, if you want to, if you're in Toronto, you can breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief. You're in a relatively safe place to be.
Well, thank you for your time and your insight today, Craig. We appreciate it.